Let's start with the obvious. What is Defrag Me?
Defrag Me is a long-form generative art series that explores self-fragmentation and reconstruction. On the surface, it looks like a puzzle. It's like an interactive puzzle, but conceptually, it's about healing, identity, and the unpredictable process of putting yourself back together.
This project, it has a personal origin. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, Defrag Me comes from a very real place. For over a year, hospitals and therapy sessions took over my life. A family member went through a severe manic episode, which led to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. It was something neither of us saw coming. It took time, but at some point I realized I needed to process this through art.
I see.
That's when I started thinking about puzzles, about how childhood trauma can't stay hidden until a crisis forces you to trace back to the pieces and figure out what led to this point. I remember in one of those therapy sessions, I asked if that dissociation of feelings, that broken self, was reversible. Is there a treatment, a process? And we were told that it was a long, difficult process. I decided then that I would be Sancho Panza, the one carrying the shield, a companion in this process. In Defrag Me, I'm passing this task to the collector, being the one putting together its pieces and revealing the beautifully grown new self.
So, the puzzle mechanic, it isn't just a game. It's part of the message?
Well, I don't think of it as a game. Rather than a game in the conventional sense, I see it as a playful approach to the art experience.
Interesting.
There is this German philosopher, Gadamer. He has a collection of essays in a book, The Relevance of the Beautiful. One of those essays is the play of art, the symbol, and the festival. In it, he explores the playful nature of both making and experiencing art, its ludic aspect. In Spanish, it was translated as el juego, which is closer to the game in English, but not in the sense of rules and winning. It's about that playful approach, an openness to interaction, interpretation, and engagement.
I see.
That's what Defrag Me leans into. It's not a game you win, but an artwork you interact with in a way that is both structured and open-ended.
How difficult are they to solve?
They come in different degrees of difficulty. Puzzles may come in 3x3, 4x4, and up to 8x8 sizes. In fact, the grid that came with my number 0, when I mean the number 0, was an 8x8, so it's the most difficult one. But distribution is not linear, and that non-linear distribution follows a statistical bell shape that resembles levels of self-fragmentation among the population. For grids 5x5 and over, I also added hints. Hints are a subtle overlay of concentric circles. They resemble fingerprints, and it's a representation of identity. We often need help to put together the pieces of a fragmented self. And to me, these hints is probably someone you talk to, but mostly therapist, professional help. Somebody that helps you understand where the fragments should go and how might the healthy self will look like. You can enable hints by tapping below the grid or hitting H on a keyboard, or also you can enable rows from 1 to 8 using the numbers.
But all puzzles are solvable, right?
Well, some puzzles are unsolvable on purpose. That was a tough decision because I like to believe that everything can be fixed, that healing is always possible.
Interesting.
But the reality is that some damage is permanent. Some things can't be undone.
Of course.
I built 2 functions related to the solvability of the puzzles. One of those is solvable, and as the name describes it, it checks if the randomized arrangement is actually solvable. The second function is fixEvil. This function takes unsolvable arrangement and makes them solvable. My initial intention was to fix every unsolvable puzzle before delivering the piece. Probably because I always hold on to that thought that everything can be solved, that we all can be healed, everything is going to be okay. It is painful to realize that sometimes damage is permanent. That's reflected in Defrag Me. Some puzzles just won't work. They will be unsolvable no matter what you do. That's part of the piece.
I understand. You mentioned you used Libertad Parametrizada as the base for Defrag Me. Why return to that work?
It felt right. Libertad Parametrizada was my first ArtBlocks project, which to me is like my long-form generative art childhood. Taking that work and breaking it apart, literally slicing it into pieces, was an act of transformation. Reflection, reassembly, rebirth. That's the process of Defrag Me.
But I noticed some slight changes from Libertad Parametrizada, other than the slicing of it.
That's right. Colors are not as bright or saturated. Even though I'm using the same palettes, they are subtly dimmed and darkened. I also added some wear marks, scars. But when I was performing the first tests, I wasn't satisfied with the experience. I needed this to be closer to the actual sliding puzzles I used to play when I was a kid. But I didn't want to go skeuomorphic. I mean, that it looked like the real thing. And I didn't want to visually lower the abstraction level. Instead, I slightly modified the sliding motion from linear to exponential acceleration, which gives a subtle, more evocative tactile feeling. Pursuing that tactile feeling, I also added a plick sound effect. This sound is also code-generated, and you'll notice that every plick has a little variation. It's a set of 2 randomly generated frequencies and waveforms. But this time I designed it to feel less plasticky. The sound is a little bit more like hardware, maybe like ceramic tile. I believe these little details are also ways to explore and develop the language of new media. It's an excellent book written in 2001.
Oh yes, great book.
But that time, Manovic was already discussing concepts like algorithm culture, modularity, variability, and how software fundamentally reshapes artistic practice. Defrag Me laps into that. It's not just an artwork, but a coded system that unfolds differently with each interaction. The sliding motion, the sounds, the scars, these aren't just stylistic choices. They emerge from the logic of digital media itself.
There's a strong connection to technology in this work. Can you talk about the defragmentation concept?
Yeah, I grew up with computers when defragmenting a hard drive was an actual thing. If you don't remember, old systems would get slower over time because files were scattered across the disk. Defragmentation would reorganize those files and fragments of files, making everything run smoothly. That process stuck with me. When I was working in this piece, I kept thinking, what if we could do that with ourselves? What if we could defragment our identity and make sense of scattered memories, organize what's broken. Of course, humans don't work like hard drive, but metaphor is powerful.
What do you want collectors to take away from this piece?
First, I want them to engage with it physically. To click, slide, experiment, get frustrated, solve, struggle, and reflect. This isn't a passive artwork. It's something you interact with. Beyond that, I hope it sparks a personal connection. Everyone carries some level of self-fragmentation, whether it is childhood trauma, identity struggles, or just the way we evolve over time. We all have pieces of ourselves that feel scattered. Defrag Me isn't about fixing that. It's about recognizing it, about deciding how to engage with those pieces. Some people will complete the puzzle, others will walk away. Both are valid choices.
And what's next for you?
After the release, I'll be launching a website where people can solve specific pieces and track their performance. I will have a leaderboard with the ones that solved number 187 with the less time, number of moves, hint usage if you're using hints or not. And it's another way to engage with the concept, but also to engage with the community. It's a little bit like when I was like a teenager and went to the arcade and you are among the top 10 and you put your initials there. It's something like that. Beyond that, we'll see. This project came from a very personal place. It is part of other series like Intrusive Thoughts, Attraction Paradox, Dolor Gravitational, which translates as gravitational pain, maybe Black and White. These are all pieces that come from that emotional process. So let's see what happens next. I don't want to force a next step.